So today, what I'd like to talk about is the role of civil and environmental engineering and its role with outreach and engagement here on campus. So let me see if I could break the talk down into sections. So first what I want to describe is, because I'm looking at the audience, what is civil and environmental engineers? You know, what do we do? Then I'll talk a little bit about what makes up our department, who's in the department, and what do we do within civil and environmental engineering. Describe briefly what the capstone course is about, and then give you some examples of our students' work. So with that, I'll suggest that if I start rambling or get really confusing, stop me. Always ask questions as we go. So what do civil engineers do? Does anybody know? Well, we develop, we innovate, we design, and we build. So I bet you're sitting there going, I think you just described every engineering discipline ever. And you probably also talked about performing in studio arts, and they do the same. So let me get a little bit more specific. Within the world of environmental civil engineers, we break ourselves down into general areas. So we start with water resources. So water resource engineers, they're looking at pretty much flows through open channels, whether that's streams or rivers, pipes. They deal with stormwater, you know, the extreme of stormwater, flooding events. So how to prevent flooding, how to mitigate flooding when it does occur. And looking at large structures, dam structures for recreation or drinking water. So they deal a whole lot with the surface water. Structures. Now this is what usually most civil engineers, or when people ask what civil engineers do, they think about structures, because we design the bridges and the tunnels and the skyscrapers. The picture up on the upper left, that's the Marlin Stadium. That was a civil engineering firm that designed that retractable roof. And what's kind of cool about that is it only takes $15 of electricity to that roof to open and close. I mean, that's how well that's designed. So it's also, I don't know if you realize that, but structural engineers, we get the designs when a building is usually more than a two-family structure or a three-story building or more. That's the role of a civil engineer. Within the world of environmental engineers, they're the ones who bring you the drinking water. They clean up the wastewater that leaves your homes and businesses. Right? I kind of always liked that. Back in my day when I was studying this, we all learned kind of the factory model, where you built concrete containers, big basins, the water came in, you cleaned it, and it left. Now what they're looking at is, hey, how do we engineer natural systems? So wetlands, how do we use wetlands to clean up the waste? Now I mention that because one of our projects this semester is looking at a constructed wetlands for Webster City. They also look at the air, the soil, solid waste. Here in our program, we focus a lot on phytoremediation, so using plants to remove the contaminants from soils. Again, just like the wetlands, using plants to clean water itself. They design the solid waste landfills also. And finally, what do I do? Transportation, so planes, trains, and automobiles. So we design the infrastructure for those. Now we also are interested in pedestrians and bike and trails, so bike alternative modes of transportation. So this is the world of our civil engineers. And it all culminates with the construction engineers, so the construction managers. Those who take our designs and actually create the building, the construction of those designs. So what do we do here? How do we teach this at the University of Iowa? Well, we have 4 of the disciplines. So we have 4 areas of concentration. We have the environmental folks, water resources, structures, and transportation. And we have 24 faculty members spread across those areas. Okay. All right, so framing what civil engineers do helps you maybe understand some of the projects and what we look for projects that our students undertake. Now, as Linda was saying, we've designed our capstone design course. So it's an outreach and engagement process. It's titled Project Design and Management. Most of our seniors just call it senior design. It's open to fourth-year students. They take it in their last semester. So this is really a culmination of all the education that they've gotten to this point. This is where we got to thank Nick and Travis so much, because it's their office that helps solicit projects throughout the state. So what we look at is we try to find projects that cover at least two of those areas, 2 of the 4 areas, so that our students are actually working in what we call interdisciplinary group, within civil engineering. So overall, the structure, I'll just kind of quickly talk about the timeline, and that is, it starts about 3 to 6 months ahead of time. That's where Travis and Nick and the office starts pulling together projects for us. I sit down with them and we go through and we evaluate the projects and whether or not they would be sufficient for our class. Okay. On the first day of the semester, the students actually are assigned teams. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that the students themselves, they have to take and pass qualifying exams in those 4 areas. And what exams they actually pass helps me assign them into projects. So if this is a water resource project, if they didn't pass the water resource exam, they are not assigned into that type of a project. Okay, they also rank the top 3 choices, because prior to the semester starting, we provide them with a list of the projects, and they give me their top 3 choices, and that also helps us assign them into classes or into projects. And then the third element is that the area of concentration, as they go through the 4 years, they choose one of those 4 areas to concentrate in. So with all that input, we assign them projects. But on the first day, they are handed an RFP. Okay, and I'll explain what that is on another slide. Now, within that first week, what they are required to do is they need to reach out and contact that client. And they set up an initial visit with the client to sit down, walk through, get a little bit more information than what's presented in the RFP. And they do a site visit. Okay? So they go to the community itself, and again, they'll view the location of the project itself. They write a proposal report and presentation, okay? And that occurs within the first month of the class. The rest of the class, the rest of the semester is for the design. So they have about 10 weeks to actually do their design. And then they're back out and they're doing on-campus presentations. This is ones that kind of gets them nervous, because the first on-campus presentation is to faculty. Sometimes we're not as nice. All right? And then they actually go and they present to the client at a location the client chooses. Okay, and I'll get to a few slides about that. But generally that's to the board, a committee, city council, general public. So the students are really out facing people in the world. So as Linda was saying, we've been working with the Office of Outreach. We started a little bit before. But since 2014 to now, we've worked in 34 communities, and we've completed 77 projects. And if you look, we're spread throughout the state. So initially we were concentrating a little bit on the Iowa City, Coralville area. And then we were quickly spreading out. And again, thanks to the Office of Outreach and Engagement, we're partnering with IISC and with the RC&D program. So we are in central Iowa, one of my favorite locations in southwest Iowa. Some of our most interesting projects have, in my opinion, have occurred in southwest Iowa. So our typical project, let me see if I can switch. Oh, maybe I shouldn't. So I was going to get to the website that lists all our previous projects. I'll wait to the end of the presentation to show those. But our typical projects, again, what we're looking at is having a project that has at least two, if not more, of our concentrations. So let me pick one of my favorites. And this happens to be in southwest Iowa. It's in Macedonia. And the title was The Folk Art Center and Colony. Okay. Oops. Okay. On day one, our students are presented with an RFP. So this is the cover page. And what we do is we mimic a professional RFP. So if this was an agency that was soliciting projects, it's a multi-page document. It lists the requirements for the project itself. Again, this is what the students actually receive on the first day. And buried in there, there's something like this. And I know this is a slide I would scream and holler at my students for having way too much text. But I'm making a point here is they're giving kind of a bare bones skeletal description. So let me see if I get through this. So the Art Center and Colony. So the district is seeking the engineering plans for a folk art center and a colony that's on a 10-acre site. Possibly we could expand that to 23 acres. The overall site design shall provide an experience which educates, entertains, and connects visitors to studio arts. Okay. Again, so the students are presented with some goals and then some more specific directions, and in this case there was 5, and it said, the development shall consist of a central building that houses displays, administrative offices, a convention and reception area. Okay, the plan shall include structural designs, architectural renderings of the central building. The site work includes drainage, storage, utility locations, vehicle access, and parking. Okay. So you start seeing how we start bringing in our areas of concentration. And that this design shall incorporate appropriate green building materials, technologies, and that are visible and enhance the visitor's experience and technologies. Okay, so all that is what Nick and Travis and I developed prior to seeing our students seeing this. Again, now what we juggle in this class is a little bit of a mix of the educational purpose with the outreach. And in this case, purposely we give them this kind of, I'll say, skeletal approach, because what we put on them is to say, okay, with that, do your research. We want you to start thinking about, well, what is green technology? What goes into parking lot designs? Things that maybe not the green technologies, but the parking lot design, for instance, would be something that I would have taught in the previous course. Structural design and things like that. So they start doing the background research, things as like finding standards, design standards, and the like. Okay, that all prepares them for their first meeting. Because what we don't allow the students to do is to show up at the client site and say, well, we don't know what to do, tell us. So what we do is, they have already done their background, their homework, and they sit down with the client, and what they do is they already start to present some design concepts to them. And they say, well, what do you think about this? Or how about this? And they interact and they engage with the client themselves so that they get more information. So again, a little bit of the educational side is this is the very first time most of our students have ever contacted anybody outside of the classroom. I always have to remind myself that they get so nervous, even on the first conference call, because they've never done those before. Just reaching out to talk to somebody in authority. But what they do is, again, they sit down with the clients and they get more background and they fill in that skeleton. And they get a lot more ideas of what's going on. They walk the site. The big farm field happens to be the site of the art colony. So this was a piece of land that one of the farmers that's just on the edge of Macedonia has donated for this project. Again, it was about 10 acres, possibly going to 23 if the farmer chose to donate more. So, they come back and they work through a proposal, right? Again, this is all kind of the preliminary stuff. So let me just go through some of the slides. And these are actually the slides that the students for this art colony put together. So they came in and they said, you know, how about if we look at architectural styles? We have 3 of them. Now, here's something that's amazing to me. We don't teach architecture and engineering or engineering. This is all driven from them taking the studio arts classes that is part of the being an engineer and more. So part of what our college requires those students to do is in the general electives that they have to take courses in the studio and performing arts. So we had one student here who was doing a pre-architecture EFA, that's what we call elective focus area. So he cobbled together a whole lot of courses outside of engineering to help him with architecture. So what he brought here is, again, he came back as the group and they offered 3 styles. Now again, I'm just putting up their slides. I haven't changed these, just to give you a feel for how much research they prepare before they go, again, with the proposal to their clients. So prairie school, sprawling, open floor plans, blends natural environments. Again, following what the client had initially said they were interested in. How about traditional and historic? Okay, so again, they were looking, the web is a great resource, so they were looking at what other art colonies are out there, and they saw, hey, some art colonies are very historic and kind of, I don't want to say kitschy, but a historic traditional. So opportunity for artists to showcase talent outside the studio. Cultural influences can be adjusted to match the style of Macedonia region. Okay, and the last one, modern and green. So modern natural materials, connection between the inside and outside. Okay, again, all based off of those initial conversations with the clients. So this was part of their written proposal. Oops. They also came back because they had to do site work, and they had 4 proposed sites. So one of the things that when we sat with the client, they said, we want the center structure, we want that to use our client's term, one of our clients, the mothership. They wanted a central building, like in this location, and that central building to be tied the site up with paths. And what's not shown on these sites, initially they were also looking for 10 studio buildings, little buildings where artists in residence could come, live, work, and be part of the colony itself. So what you see is a bunch of winding paths connecting. Those little boxes there was the initial siting of some of those smaller buildings. Okay, so again, this was part of a proposal where they would then present to the client. Again, the field where the project would be located. Just to point out, it's not flat, right? So there was challenges on site. So locating that parking lot, locating the drainage, Again, and all tying this to make sure that it's attractive and reflects the nature. Okay. All right, another set of options they again present to their client. In this case, 4 different floor plans. So they had that central building, and they were told what needed to be in there, but never given any size. Okay. They just said needed to have some room for displays. They needed a area to sell merchandise. They needed administrative area, on and on, the kind of the wish list. So again, what they do is they pull together some of the options for their clients. Okay. Again, where I'm going with this is that I want to make the emphasis that our students aren't doing this in isolation. They don't come back and just sit down and work in their computer rooms. They're in contact with the clients. Now, one of the things that I require and my co-instructors require is that they stay in contact with their sponsoring folks. So whether that's every other week an email or a telephone call, they stay in contact. Now, most of our sites are fairly far away. Macedonia, what was that, Nick, about a 5-hour drive? So in those cases, we just require 2 site visits, that initial site visit and then a final site visit to do a final presentation. But in the meantime, again, they're doing a lot of Zoom meetings and conversations. So imagine this. There's a written report that contains all this. I just picked out the nice photos, the images, but there's a lot of text that goes along with this. The client then chooses what they want. Leads us to the final design. Okay, so the final design doesn't do us justice right now in 2D, but this was their final site design. The main building here with the interconnecting trails. Those studio buildings would be along those trails. A big amphitheater. That was one of the pushing. They wanted an amphitheater to bring people to Macedonia for large art fests. Okay. Again, they're fairly close to Omaha, and they're believing that they can draw a large group of people. This was the final footprint of the building that they designed. Again, probably not too legible for you, but again, they met everything that was in the client's wish list. The engineering side of things, they did the access roads, and they have the design calculations and everything that's associated with the roads themselves. Parking lots, it's one of those things that you probably don't really think too much about when you park your car. A lot of the engineering goes into that. A lot of it is how do you keep the water, where do you drain the water, how large should those parking spots be, and if you put them in, can cars get in and out of those parking spots with ease. So they have the engineering side of that. They have the actual structural design. Okay, so this is where our students excel. They actually took the building, that architectural renderings, and they designed the frame, the structure that actually supports the building. Okay, so they designed each one of those columns and beams. They created a 3D modeling of it, and they tested it out using structural analysis software. So the building is more than a pretty picture. They actually have the structure to support it, as well as the foundation. In this case, I just pulled out a few footings. Again, for non-engineers, you might say, okay, I like the better pretty pictures. But this is really what goes on behind the scenes in most every building that, again, we don't really pay too much attention to. If we kind of look up here, unless you're a structural engineer, you probably wouldn't get excited about whether that's a W flange or an I. Okay, and then they pull it all together in a 3D model here. Okay, so this is a 3D model. It's in software called Revit, and let me see if I can get out of this. Because I want to share with you oops. I want to share with you the fly-through movies. So this is the model, the 3D model that they created within their software. You see it's a fly-through around the building, the interconnecting walkways, a view of the amphitheater, again, designed so each one of those elements for the amphitheater, for example, design calculations for the concrete, looking at the exterior of the building. Again, I could ask somebody who's better in architecture, what kind of style is this? And so that's the interior. That's the exterior. And this is their vision of the interior. So again, the layout of the rooms. We definitely don't claim to be interior designers. So. That was their big open gallery space. They had a lot of back and forth with the clients about placements of windows, about what would be good or not so good for displaying art. So as this is playing, one of the people on the committee was a principal owner of an architectural firm that practices out of Omaha. And the students did a presentation, and they used these fly-throughs. They used a lot of the graphics that I showed you. And as they were presenting, they finished, and one of the first comments from the principal owner was, "Remind me, how many people worked on this?" And they're like, you saw their face, they thought they were going to be in trouble. They're like, 4? And he goes, "And how much time did you have?" "Oh, like 10 weeks. And he just stopped and he said, "I can't get my entire office to do this much work in that amount of time." And then he's like, "I'll offer any of you a job right now." And they all kind of laughed and it's like, "We like that, but we already are employed." So fortunately, our students already had jobs at the time. Okay, so that was the art colony. Again, a couple other examples. We had a condominium development. Now, these examples that I'm picking are very heavy on the structure side, very heavy on the visual side. I was hoping that it would be more interesting for you all. But the condominium development, this was up in Mason City. It was started with, here's the existing site. It was a private landowner. Her and her husband had been looking to develop this or redevelop this parcel of land for housing. In this case, they weren't quite sure whether it's going to be for seniors or for young professionals. But they wanted to have offer dense housing. Okay, so our students, again, had some goals and objectives and certain things that they had to consider. So if you look at this, there's existing housing. There's a fun story about this. As the students pulled up to look at the site, somebody at one of these houses came out, and it's like, "Hey, what are you all doing?" And when our students said, "Oh, we're looking," and they explained what was happening, he said, My landlord never told me that. When do I have to move? Well, anyway, this was a site, and it overlooks the river that runs through Mason City. So what the students were able to do was to come back and, again, after doing that whole thing about the proposals, they came back with engineering designs. So what they put together was, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-story condo building. Again, what I'm not showing is all the engineering calculations here, but they have the entire structural design for the building laid out. They did the 3D model, again, interior, exterior. Okay. All, again, based off of interacting with the client. So again, in this case, it was a private landowner and the planning department within Mason City itself. And at the end of the day, they put together, again, some nice renderings. One of the things that we definitely emphasize within our program is to take the engineering information and create something that most people would be reacting to in a favorable way rather than looking at an engineering design plans. Okay. So in this case, again, what you're looking at is the building itself and the site development where you have parking, in this case a detention basin for the drainage. They had a difficult time with the sloping of the site itself. Below this is rock, so there wasn't a lot that they could do without, let's say, blasting the rock away. Okay, again, just some illustrations of how our students are, I like to say, the engineer and more. Okay. Another example, we had a firehouse restoration. Oops. So there was a firehouse. It was a historic building, or is a historic building. So this is the first firehouse in the town, right? It kind of looks real nice and pretty. So that was built back in, I believe it was the 1920s, maybe the 1910s. The paper where students did their background research, it was a big deal when they had the first motorized fire truck to use the building. Well, that was in use until the 1970s. 1970s came and they decommissioned it as a firehouse. And Public Works took it over and they used it for the sign shop. So where they made the traffic signs. And that lasted for a decade or so. And in the 1980s, they abandoned it. And so it was no longer used. It was boarded up. So this was the building when we were up there investigating it, doing our site visit. So you see it was boarded up, entryways. The brick was all peeling off. Okay. The interior wasn't so good. Notice the ceilings caved in, pretty much the roof in most sections really just rusted out. It was just in a general bad shape, except for the foundation. This is the basement. The foundation was almost pristine. And it was partly because, I can't see if you see in this picture, but when they poured this back in the day, they just poured like a 24-inch wide concrete walls. Nothing's going to be moving that, right? And it wasn't, there was very little water coming in. Okay, so the students were tasked with, can you restore this? So can you take everything that's wrong with it, come back, for example, redo the roof? So the students came in, they did the structural analysis, structural design of the roof. There's a couple of walls that they had to do an analysis for replacing. It was masonry block. So they came, again, some of the engineering drawings up here, the roof plan with the web girders. And also part of this was they needed to locate parking, because one of the things that the city was looking for was, could we restore the building and then sell it to a private entity. So maybe like a doctor's office or some other type of retail. But one of the challenging things was, how do you get some parking in here? Because what's not shown, well, maybe, see that big water tower? Well, that's been replaced, but there's still a water tower back there. Rules and regulations have changed. Homeland Security requires a large buffer around those types of installations. So what used to be available parking in the back, there's a big parking lot back here, now you couldn't touch because of the water tower. So our students had to try to design some parking on that little lot and not encroach into McDonald's parking either. Okay, so with that, they created their design, and again, with some of their 3D rendering capabilities, they went from the before to an after, and before and an after. Again, more 3D models. What I would also emphasize is when we ask them to do those 3D models, it's not just for the pictures. They actually are doing some of the analysis with that. Okay, so those are three of the 77 projects that we've created. So how does some of this information get out? Well, this is one of the students' final presentations. This is a project from last semester down in Davis County for the school district. What they asked to do was pretty much way up here in the corner. I don't know if you could see it. That's their site design. What the school wanted was a garden, but this was on steep slopes, and they wanted the garden for like preschool through 8th grade. So the students themselves, they presented their information, and I just show this picture of who they present to. So this is a good example of when they go to the client to present, it's just not to like one or two individuals. A lot of times they'll invite the general public. So this was a standing room only room, and part of this was the local news cameras were here, or the news stations were here. And this was one of the interesting things. They were presenting, just like I'm standing here, and all of a sudden the cameras were like being shoved in their face from below, and they handled it so well. I think I would have panicked if I saw somebody pointing a camera at me right here. So they presented to the audience, and again, it's a lot of give and take at these presentations. Okay. And then the local media does cover this. So this happens to be a trail project that we completed. So this is down in Soley. Did a project to connect Soley and Linville with a bike and pedestrian trail. Local news media picks up on it. The first picture, the opening picture was in Glenwood. That was a trail. So a trail with a trailhead. And is the beginning now of the regional trail system in that area. So something to emphasize, I'll emphasize here, our students are doing these preliminary designs. They're not meant for construction, or we don't say that they're professional engineered projects. But what tends to happen is either the communities pick these up and they create an RFP for professional services, so they have an understanding of what goes into these projects, based off our students' work. So when they do hire the professional engineer, they have a head start, and the project is up and running. I'll tell you one of the stories that we heard from one of our local consultants was, they came back and said, Paul, one of the things that I would ask you to do is when the students create team names, don't have them be embarrassing, because they circulate in the engineering's office. And for example, one of our team names was the SWAG engineers. So every time they kept referring to the SWAG. So the communities use these either for RFPs. A lot of times they use them for grant applications. So they'll take the students' work. They have a general idea, again, of cost and materials. And grant agencies like to see that there's work already started So that helps them with those types of things. So in this case, again, this is where Glenwood started. We also did a park redesign for Baxter in central Iowa. So what I was told recently is the city council is using the students' ideas, their plans, to actually start going out and looking for certain elements of the park to be constructed now. And I could go through several more examples. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, I got a call from one of our partners who said, Paul, one of your students' projects was on a stormwater detention management plan. The community there's a private developer who wants to develop, and they think it's actually in that problem area that your students identified. Do you think I could have that report again? Because I kind of misplaced it. So again, what we could do is just to provide them with that information, and there the city council could look at that and have some more information of, is this really the area that we want to be developing or not? Again, so looking at that, I like to say there's a lot of thanks that I need to give. First, I'm going to say I'm very much appreciative for our former DEO, our former chairperson, so Michelle. She has allowed us to devote a lot of faculty resources to this, because I'm the lead instructor, but I also have 2 other co-instructors, and we have the ability to go to any other faculty member in our department for advice. And one of the good things about this is their reputation's on the line too, because more and more of our work gets out into Iowa. They come back. So there's pride from the faculty in how to do these. The other is my initial co-instructor, Jakob Odgaard. He retired last year, I guess, a year and a half ago. So he and I were the ones who converted the class into this outreach and engagement. So he and I worked together up until last spring of 2017. We have 2 new folks. So Rick Foss has joined us. For those who know him, he was the Public Works Director here in Iowa City. So he brings great information on constructability and practicality to these projects. And Chris Stokes, who's one of our structural engineers, definitely helps guide our students through those. Okay, so those are our co-instructors, and my final thanks is we really can't do this without the Office of Outreach and Engagement. So Linda, thank you for doing all this, for allowing us to do this, providing us with those resources, and Nick and Travis for how many hours you put in for us. So thank you. So with that, I've probably gone real long, but Civil Hawks, we make a difference in the world. So with that, any questions? Yeah.
What's the percentage of the cities that actually do the projects? Does every city, you found that every city that you went to actually do the project or complete the project that the students have suggested?
I don't have an actual hard number on that. It's just more stories that I hear, or when the students come back. And when we're doing a lot of projects locally, they would come back and start seeing like projects that we're doing in Coralville. You know, one good example there was, is it Fifth Avenue or Fifth Street, the one that goes perpendicular to the power company, that green infrastructure that was based off of our students, one of our students' projects. But we haven't tracked that.
If I could help answer that, I was the Public Works Director in Muscatine for 37 years.
Oh, you look familiar.
And looked at several different projects. And although we didn't take a project specifically, we used that, their ideas, the different things that they brought to it to do our own development and innovation as we solve the best efforts of the community. And we continue to use those, what I call them blueprints, that the students have provided to us as we move forward with other projects. So
Yes?
Did you say these are master's students? Are they undergrad students?
Oh, these are all undergraduates. So they're all 4th-year undergrads.
So
Yeah, boy, you sound like one of the students in the first day of class. So it's a 3-hour class, so it's not any different than other design courses in our program. I always tell the students to expect to average 10 hours per week on this class. And I emphasize the average part because some weeks a little bit of time, other weeks it could be a 40-hour commitment. But yeah, that's generally what they're looking for, is about a 10-hour commitment per week.
Feels like they need to keep adding more, right, in terms of polishing, so they probably need to balance their time, because if this is something they're really into, too, they're probably going to spend a fair amount of time, which is a good thing. They have these other classes. I was also
Yeah.
curious, I've had a little bit of experience with in the business world, MBA, they do some client work there, and I think there's actually a transfer of money. In this situation, is this just all the service that's provided? There's no, I don't know, any type of a monetary exchange?
We usually request just reimbursement for direct travel, and some are free. You know, several communities that are local don't necessarily pay, or if travel's not an issue. But yeah, no, we're not looking for tens of thousands of dollars for this. Yeah.
How do the cities come to you, to your office, or do you go out and promote, or how do you make the connections?
Too bad Nick left.
Well, we do reach out to the cities across Iowa to let them know that there's an opportunity to work with our office. And we have an RFP process for a specific partnership opportunity, which is called IISC. And that produces a lot of projects that end up being picked up by Paul in his class. And then those communities that aren't awarded that full partnership also, they still provide great project opportunities for us. And so we can go back to them and say, we can do maybe 1 or 2 things in your community. We're not going to do the full partnership, but we still have opportunities to do this kind of project. So there's some marketing that goes into that so that they know that the opportunity exists, but then the communities are the ones that provide us with the opportunity.
Yeah, I still get telephone calls from communities that say, hey, we heard you did a trail project, and we have this idea too. Do you think you could help us out? So one of the things that I've seen since I've started on this side is the word of mouth has gotten out that the students' projects are worth the time. So I do get those telephone calls, which was so much easier now than the first year when we were sending out letters and knocking on doors and making telephone calls. All right. So, well, thank you.